The moment Olivia Matthews walked into his living room, Mark Sullivan felt something he'd buried 5 years ago. Hope. But when his daughter Emma revealed the truth about Ms. Matthews' engagement, Mark knew he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Now he had exactly 7 days to fix it before she left town forever. Mark Sullivan hadn't smiled, really smiled, since his wife's funeral. 5 years of raising Emma alone had hardened him into someone he barely recognized in the mirror. The dating apps his friends installed on his phone collected digital dust. "I'm good," he'd tell them. The lies so practiced, it almost sounded true. Emma deserved better than a dad who was just good. But Mark had convinced himself this half-life was enough for both of them. Emma was 10 now, all gangly limbs and curious eyes that saw too much. "Dad," she said one evening while he stirred spaghetti sauce that came from a jar, because cooking was just another thing he'd given up. "Ms. Matthews says, you should come to parent-teacher night tomorrow." "I've got a deadline," he answered automatically. Mark's graphic design business kept them comfortable, but required constant attention. At least that's what he told himself when avoiding social situations. "She specifically asked about you." Emma persisted, twirling a strand of hair that matched her mother's shade of auburn. She said, "It's important." Something in Emma's tone made Mark look up. His daughter was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hopeful, maybe calculating, he sighed. "Fine, I'll be there." What Mark didn't expect was for Ms. Matthews to be young, brilliant, and to laugh in a way that made the classroom feel warmer. She spoke about Emma with such insight that Mark felt ashamed for not knowing his daughter was struggling with math, but excelling at creative writing. "She has her father's artistic eye," Olivia Matthews said with a smile that reached her eyes. "How would you know that?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Emma shows me your designs sometimes. She's very proud of you." The walk home that night felt different. Emma skipped ahead, while Mark found himself thinking about the way Ms. Matthews' hands moved when she talked about literature. Passionate, alive. "She's single, you know," Emma said casually, stopping to wait for him to catch up. "Who?" "Ms. Matthews." "Olivia. She told us to call her that outside school." Mark frowned. "Emma Sullivan. Are you trying to set me up with your teacher?" Emma shrugged, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Maybe. You both like books and art and boring documentaries. And you both look sad sometimes when you think no one's watching." The observation hit Mark like a physical blow. Was he that transparent? And more importantly, was he teaching his daughter that grief was permanent? 3 days later, Mark found himself agreeing to help with classroom art projects. A week after that, he was having coffee with Olivia after school, while Emma had soccer practice. By the end of the month, he'd laughed more than he had in years. "You should come over for dinner," he said finally, the words tumbling out before he could overthink them. "Emma would love it, and I make a decent lasagna." The line made him wince internally. He'd have to find a recipe and practice immediately. Olivia's smile faltered slightly. "I'd like that, but there's something you should know first." Mark's heart sank. Of course there was something. There was always something. "I'm only at Jefferson Elementary until the end of the semester. I've been accepted to a teaching program in Boston. It's been my dream for years." Boston across the country. Mark nodded mechanically, already rebuilding the walls he'd let slip. "That's great. Congratulations." The dinner happened anyway. Mark spent hours on that lasagna, burning his fingers twice and nearly setting off the smoke alarm. Emma cleaned her room without being asked and even put fresh flowers on the dining table. When Olivia arrived with a bouquet of sunflowers and a bottle of wine, the evening stretched before them with possibility. They talked for hours after Emma went to bed. Olivia spoke about losing her mother to cancer in college, about changing careers from business to teaching, about her collection of first edition books. Mark found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone. How he still kept Sarah's voicemails on his phone. How terrified he was of failing Emma. How some days he still reached for his wife in his sleep. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," he admitted as they stood at the door. "It's scary as hell." Olivia's eyes softened. "Me neither. And yes, it is." Their first kiss was hesitant, then certain. Mark felt something crack open inside him, painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone. The weeks that followed were a blur of movie nights, weekend hikes, and Emma's not-so-subtle approval. Mark found himself planning for a future again. Maybe Boston wouldn't be so bad. He could work remotely. Emma might like the change of scenery. Then came the night that changed everything. Emma was at a sleepover, and Mark had prepared dinner at his place. Candles, music, the works. He was going to tell Olivia he was falling in love with her, that he was ready to take a chance. When she arrived, her eyes were red-rimmed. "We need to talk," she said, and Mark felt the floor tilt beneath him. "My ex-fiancé called today," she continued, sitting on the edge of the couch. "He's in town. He wants to meet." Fiancé. Mark repeated the word foreign on his tongue. "You were engaged." Olivia nodded, twisting her hands. "Ended badly last year. He's the reason I applied to the Boston program to get away, and now he's here." Mark's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "He says he's changed, that he made a mistake." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I don't know what to do, Mark. We were together for 6 years." Mark felt the familiar numbness creeping back. Of course. This would happen just when he'd started to believe again. "You should see him," he said finally, the words like ash in his mouth. "You need closure at least." She reached for his hand. "What about us? What about us?" The question hung between them, heavy with potential and fear. "I can't compete with history," Mark said quietly. "And I won't be someone's second choice again." The hurt in her eyes was immediate. "Is that what you think this is? I think you need to figure out what you want. And I need to protect myself and Emma." Olivia stood, gathering her coat. "You're pushing me away before I can hurt you. That's not fair, Mark." "Life isn't fair," he answered, the bitterness surprising even him. "I learned that when I became a widower at 32. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. 3 days passed with no contact. Mark threw himself into work, avoiding Emma's questions about why Olivia hadn't been over. On the 4th day, Emma came home from school quiet and withdrawn. "What's wrong, kiddo?" Mark asked, trying to sound normal. "Ms. Matthews was crying in the bathroom today," Emma said, her voice small. "I heard her tell the principal she might leave before the semester ends." Mark's chest tightened. "That's her choice, Em." Emma looked at him with her mother's eyes. "Did you mess it up, Dad? Because you're scared." "It's complicated, honey." "No, it's not," Emma insisted. "You like her. She likes you. You're both just being dumb." Out of the mouths of babes. Mark sat heavily on the couch. Sometimes adults make mistakes because they're trying to protect themselves. "Mom wouldn't want you to be alone forever," Emma said quietly. "She told me to take care of you, you know, before she died." Mark's throat closed. "She did." Emma nodded. "She said you try to be strong all by yourself, but that you needed someone to make you laugh." She paused. "Ms. Matthews makes you laugh, Dad." The next morning, Mark drove Emma to school instead of letting her take the bus. He watched as she ran to meet her friends, then steeled himself and walked toward the building. He'd wait until after classes to talk to Olivia, to apologize, to ask for another chance. But as he turned to leave, he saw them in the parking lot. Olivia and a tall man in an expensive suit talking intensely. The man reached for her hand, and though Olivia pulled away, the gesture was enough to stop Mark in his tracks. He drove home in a daze, the old familiar numbness settling over him like a shroud. That evening, the doorbell rang. Mark opened it to find Olivia on his porch, her expression determined. "You're avoiding me," she said. "I saw you with him this morning." Olivia's eyes widened. "You were at the school. Why didn't you come talk to me?" "You seemed busy," Mark replied, hating how petty he sounded. He showed up unannounced. "I told him to leave." She stepped closer. "I told him I'd met someone who made me believe in second chances." Mark's heart stuttered. "And what did he say to that?" "It doesn't matter what he said. What matters is what I'm saying to you now." Olivia took a deep breath. "I'm not going to Boston. I've withdrawn my application." "You can't do that," Mark protested. "It's your dream." "Dreams change," she said simply. "Sometimes they get better." "I'm a package deal," Mark warned. "Emma and me, we come with baggage." Olivia smiled. "Good thing I'm strong." "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too," she whispered. "But I'm more afraid of walking away from this from us than I am of trying." Mark reached for her then, pulling her close. "I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything sooner." She looked up at him. "No more secrets." "No more secrets?" He agreed. From a staircase came a small cheer. They turned to see Emma watching them, grinning from ear to ear. Finally, she exclaimed, "You guys are being so slow." Mark and Olivia laughed, and for the first time in 5 years, Mark felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. He wasn't betraying Sarah's memory by finding happiness again. He was honoring her by living fully, by showing Emma that love was worth a risk. But just as life seemed to be falling into place, Mark received a call that would test their newfound happiness. Sarah's parents, who had distanced themselves after her death, suddenly wanted more involvement in Emma's life. They'd never approved of how quickly Mark had returned to work after Sarah died, how he'd moved them to a new house to escape the memories. Now, they were threatening legal action for more visitation rights. "They're her grandparents," Olivia said gently when Mark raged about the unfairness. "Maybe this could be good for Emma." "You don't understand," Mark snapped. "They blamed me. Said I didn't get Sarah to the doctor soon enough when she first got sick. Like I wanted to lose her." Olivia's face softened. "Oh, Mark, you never told me that." "Because it's the one thing I can't forgive them for," he admitted, his voice breaking. "What if they're right? What if I could have saved her?" That night, Olivia held him while he finally grieved properly, not just for Sarah, but for the guilt he'd carried silently for 5 years. In the morning, they made a plan. They would invite Sarah's parents for dinner. They would try to heal old wounds for Emma's sake. The dinner was tense at first. Robert and Patricia Lawson sat stiffly in the living room, eyeing Olivia with suspicion. Emma, sensing the tension, became uncharacteristically quiet. So Patricia said finally, "You're the teacher." "Yes," Olivia replied evenly. "I've had the privilege of teaching Emma this year. And now you're what? Playing house with my daughter's husband." "Mom," Mark warned. But Olivia placed a hand on his arm. "I would never try to replace Sarah," she said quietly. "From everything I've heard, she was an extraordinary woman who loved her family deeply. I'm not here to erase her memory, but to help honor it by caring for the people she loved most." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "We miss her every day." "So do we," Mark said, his voice gentler than he'd intended. "Emma has her smile, you know, and her kindness." Something shifted in the room. Robert, who hadn't spoken yet, cleared his throat. "We brought some photos, things we thought Emma might like to have." As they looked through old albums, the stories began to flow. Sarah as a rebellious teenager. Sarah meeting Mark for the first time and coming home to announce she'd met her future husband. Sarah pregnant with Emma, radiant and terrified. "She would have wanted you to be happy," Robert said suddenly, looking at Mark. "She told us that near the end. Made us promise to make sure you didn't become a hermit." Mark laughed through his tears. "That sounds like her." By the end of the evening, tentative plans had been made for Emma to spend part of her summer vacation with her grandparents. As they left, Patricia hugged Olivia. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing our family back together." The months that followed weren't perfect. Mark still had days when grief ambushed him. Olivia struggled to find her place in a family shaped by loss. Emma tested boundaries as she adjusted to the new normal. But there were also movie nights where they laughed until their sides hurt. Sunday mornings when Olivia and Emma made pancakes, while Mark pretended not to notice they were using his mother's recipe wrong. Evenings when Mark caught Olivia looking at him with such tenderness it made his chest ache. Then came the day Mark found Emma in Sarah's closet, the one space he'd never been able to clear out. She was sitting among her mother's clothes, holding a small velvet box. "What's this, Dad?" she asked, opening it to reveal a vintage emerald ring. Mark sat beside her, taking the box. "This was your great-grandmother's ring. Mom was saving it for you for when you grew up." Emma touched the emerald gently. "It's the same color as Ms. Matthews' eyes." Mark stared at his daughter, then at the ring. "Yeah," he said slowly. "It is." That night, after Emma was asleep, Mark opened Sarah's closet again. He ran his hands over her dresses, brought one to his face to see if her scent remained. It didn't, of course, but for the first time, that didn't devastate him. "I think it's time," he said aloud, "to let someone else in properly." He could almost hear Sarah's laugh. "About time, Sullivan." The next day, Mark asked Emma for her help with a special project. Together, they cleaned out Sarah's closet, keeping special pieces for Emma and donating the rest. Mark placed the emerald ring in his pocket. "Are you going to ask her?" Emma asked, eyes wide with excitement. Do you think I should? Emma rolled her eyes in that preteen way she'd recently perfected. Dad, she's like the one. The one, huh? Mark smiled. When did you get so wise? I've always been the smart one in this family. Emma replied with a grin that was pure Sarah. Mark planned the proposal carefully. He enlisted Emma's help, of course, and even reached out to Sarah's parents for their blessing, which they gave with tearful enthusiasm. On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 1 year after they'd first met at parent-teacher night, Mark took Olivia to the elementary school playground. After hours, Emma had helped decorate it with fairy lights and flowers. "What's all this?" Olivia asked, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights. "This is where it all began," Mark said, taking her hands. "Where Emma's meddling finally broke through my thick skull." Olivia laughed. "She's persistent. That one, like her mother," Mark said softly. "Sarah would have loved you. You know, your passion for teaching, your terrible cooking, the way you never let me get away with my brooding crap." Tears filled Olivia's eyes. "I wish I could have known her. In a way, you do through Emma. Through the parts of me that are better because of her." Mark took a deep breath. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. Never thought I'd want to. But Emma was right. You make me laugh. You make me want to try again." He dropped to one knee, pulling out the emerald ring. This was Sarah's grandmother's ring. Sarah wanted it to stay in the family, to be part of our future. I can't think of a better way to honor that wish than to ask you to be part of that future. Olivia Matthews, will you marry me? Olivia's hands flew to her mouth. "Mark, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he said, still kneeling. "I love you, Olivia. Emma loves you. We want you to be part of our family officially." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Mark slipped the emerald ring onto her finger, a small figure darted out from behind the playground equipment. She said yes. Emma shouted, running toward them. "I knew it. I knew it." Mark laughed as Emma crashed into them, turning the moment into a group hug. "Were you hiding there the whole time? You little spy." "Duh," Emma said, beaming up at them. "I had to make sure you didn't mess it up. You're kind of a disaster with words sometimes, Dad." Olivia laughed through her tears, holding up her hand to admire the ring. "It's beautiful. It matches your eyes," Emma said proudly. "That was my idea." "Of course it was," Olivia replied, hugging Emma tightly. "You're the mastermind behind all of this, aren't you?" Emma shrugged, but her smile was smug. "Someone had to fix you, too. You were both being total chickens." That night, as they walked home hand in hand with Emma skipping ahead, Mark felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The guilt that had been his constant companion was finally beginning to fade. He wasn't betraying Sarah by finding happiness again. He was honoring her by living fully, by giving Emma the family she deserved. The wedding planning brought its own challenges. Mark's parents were thrilled, but some of his friends seemed uncomfortable with how quickly he'd moved on, at least in their eyes. They didn't understand that the year with Olivia had been preceded by 5 years of lonely grief. "People will talk," his friend Dave warned over beers one night. "They'll say it's too soon. Let them talk," Mark replied, surprising himself with his certainty. 5 years of being half alive was enough. Emma deserves to see what a real partnership looks like. Olivia faced her own hurdles. Her ex-fiancé, James, returned again, this time with dramatic promises and tearful apologies. "We have history," he insisted during an unexpected visit to her apartment. "This guy, he's just a rebound. He comes with a kid and a dead wife's ghost." Olivia's response was swift and certain. "That kid is the most amazing person I've ever met." And Mark's love for Sarah doesn't diminish what we have. It deepens it. He knows how precious love is because he's lost it once. "I'll take that over your history any day." When she told Mark about the encounter, expecting him to be upset, he surprised her by laughing. "Poor guy never stood a chance, did he?" "Not even a little bit," she confirmed, curling into his side on the couch. They decided on a small wedding in the backyard of the house that had once felt too empty to Mark, but now buzzed with life. Emma insisted on being both flower girl and best daughter, a title she created for herself. Sarah's parents offered to help with the preparations, a gesture that brought Mark to tears when they weren't looking. The night before the wedding, Mark found Emma sitting on the porch swing, unusually quiet. "Cold feet, kiddo?" he asked, joining her. She shook her head. "I was just thinking about Mom. Do you think she'd be mad?" Mark's heart clenched. "About Olivia?" "No, sweetheart. Your mom would never be mad about us finding happiness. But what if we forget her? When Olivia moves in and everything changes," Mark pulled his daughter close. "That could never happen. Your mom is part of you in your smile, in your laugh, in the way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking hard. We don't have to choose between remembering her and loving Olivia. Hearts don't work that way. They expand." Emma considered this like the Grinch when his heart grows 3 sizes. Mark laughed exactly like that, except without the stealing Christmas part. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Mark stood under an arch of flowers in the backyard, watching as Emma walked down the makeshift aisle, tossing rose petals with dramatic flair. Then came Olivia, radiant in a simple white dress, her red hair loose around her shoulders. As they exchanged vows, Mark felt a strange sense of Sarah's presence, not as a ghost or a shadow, but as a blessing. When he slipped the wedding band onto Olivia's finger to join the emerald engagement ring, he knew with absolute certainty that this was right. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and the small gathering erupted in cheers. Emma was the loudest of all, jumping up and down beside them. The reception was simple but joyful. They danced under string lights in the backyard, ate cake that Emma had helped decorate somewhat lopsidedly, and laughed as Mark's college friends told embarrassing stories about his younger days. Later, as the party wound down, Mark found Olivia standing by the memory table they'd set up, a small display with photos of Sarah, Mark's father, who had passed years ago, and Olivia's mother. It was their way of acknowledging that love doesn't end with death. It transforms. Having second thoughts, he asked softly, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him. "Not a single one. I was just thinking about how life takes such unexpected turns. 5 years ago, I was in a relationship that looked perfect on paper, but felt wrong in my heart. You were drowning in grief. Emma was trying to hold everything together. And now look at us. A regular Brady Bunch," Mark joked. "Better," Olivia replied. "We're real. Messy and complicated and real." The adjustment to living together full-time had its bumps. Olivia was neat to the point of obsession. Mark left coffee cups in every room. Emma tested boundaries, occasionally playing them against each other before they established united parenting rules. There were arguments about money, about discipline, about whether Olivia was trying too hard to replace Sarah. She wasn't, but fear made Mark lash out once. But there was also joy. So much joy it sometimes overwhelmed Mark. Waking up next to Olivia every morning. Family movie nights where they quoted lines from Emma's favorite films. Weekend trips to the beach where Emma taught Olivia to build proper sandcastles while Mark pretended not to notice them burying him in sand while he napped. 6 months after the wedding, Olivia placed a small box in Mark's hands one morning before Emma woke up. "What's this?" he asked, still half asleep. "Open it," she urged, her eyes bright with excitement. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes and a positive pregnancy test. Mark stared at it, then at her, his heart racing. "Are you serious?" Olivia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know we talked about waiting a year or 2, but apparently the universe had other plans." Mark pulled her into his arms, his own eyes wet. "Emma's going to lose her mind. She's been dropping hints about wanting a sibling for months." "I know," Olivia laughed. "She left a baby name book on my nightstand last week." Real subtle, that one. When they told Emma over breakfast, her reaction didn't disappoint. She screamed so loudly the neighbors probably heard, then immediately began listing potential names and declaring herself the best big sister in the history of big sisters. As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, Mark found himself experiencing a strange mix of emotions. Joy and excitement, yes, but also a renewed grief for Sarah, who would never know this child. One night, he confessed this to Olivia as they lay in bed, her belly now a definite bump between them. "I feel guilty," he admitted, "like I'm replacing our family with a new one." Olivia took his hand and placed it on her stomach where their baby was kicking vigorously. "We're not replacing anything. We're adding growing. This baby will know about Sarah. We'll see her pictures and hear stories about how brave she was, how much she loved Emma. Our family tree has many branches, Mark. That's what makes it strong. When Thomas Robert Sullivan was born on a snowy February morning, he had his father's dark hair, his mother's green eyes, and his half-sister's immediate devotion. Emma appointed herself as official protector, reading him stories every night, even though he was too young to understand them. He needs to know all the good books, she explained seriously, so he can be smart like me and Mom and Olivia. Life settled into a new rhythm. Mark's design business thrived as he found renewed creative energy. Olivia took a year off from teaching, then returned part-time, bringing baby Thomas with her for special reading days that made him the most popular infant in Jefferson Elementary. Emma blossomed into a confident preteen, excelling at both writing and math now that she had Olivia's patient tutoring. She still kept a photo of Sarah by her bed, but now was joined by family pictures that included Olivia and Thomas. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, which was also the 10th anniversary of Sarah's passing, Mark took his family to the cemetery. It was a tradition he and Emma had maintained, but this was the first time Olivia and Thomas had joined them. 3-year-old Thomas, solemn in his little button-up shirt, placed a daisy on the grave because daisies are the happiest flowers. Emma, now 15 and taller than Olivia, read a poem she had written about memories and love. Olivia stood slightly back, giving them space while still being present. As they walked back to the car, Emma slipped her hand into Olivia's. "Mom would have really liked you," she said matter-of-factly. "You're both stubborn and smart, and you both laugh at Dad's dumb jokes, even though they're not funny." "Hey," Mark protested, but his heart was too full for real indignation. That night, after the kids were in bed, Mark and Olivia sat on the porch swing where he had once comforted Emma before their wedding. "Thank you," he said simply, taking Olivia's hand. "For what?" "For loving us. For being brave enough to take on a broken man and his daughter, for giving us Thomas, for everything." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for letting me in. I know how hard that was for you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "You know," Mark said finally, "I used to think happiness was something you got a limited supply of, like the universe would only allow you so much before taking it back." And now Olivia asked, "Now I think it's more like those plants that grow better when you divide them. The more you share it, the more it multiplies." Olivia smiled. "That's beautiful and very unlike your usual dad jokes." "Don't get used to it," he warned with a grin. "I've got a new knock-knock joke I'm trying out on Thomas tomorrow." As they laughed together in the gentle evening air, Mark felt a sense of completion. His life had taken a path he never could have imagined in those dark days after Sarah's death. There had been so much pain, so much loss, but also so much unexpected joy. All because his daughter had introduced him to her teacher. All because he had finally found the courage to open his heart again. Please leave a comment about the video, and remember to subscribe to the Echo Tales YouTube channel.